Hey everybody, welcome to my Feeding the Starved Marriage workshop. It's a free webinar and I'm so excited to have you here. I know it wasn't easy. There's a lot of stuff you had to line up to get here, didn't you? You had to make sure your kids were okay. You had to see if you could get your husband to come be a part of it or your wife to be a part of it, but you made it. And so can I just first of all suggest, whatever problems you're having in your marriage, you're in the right place. I promise this program will help, and I promise most importantly, you're going to learn some pretty amazing secrets that honestly we use a lot when we're coaching our couples and working with people that are struggling with their marriage. A lot of therapists even use them. The problem is a lot of people don't know the secrets except the therapists. And so what we're going to try to do in this 1-hour webinar is show you the secrets to start feeding your marriage and make it so your marriage can actually make it on its own, that it can actually bring some hope, some joy, some excitement for you. And it's not an easy process, but it's a lot easier than I think you know or you would believe. And this program, I promise, over the next hour we're going to walk you through it. So as we get into this, a couple things just to know. It doesn't matter what kind of relationship you're in. Sometimes we just have what I call the munchies. Our relationships are struggling just a little bit. They need a little bit of food. They need a little bit of a pick-me-up here and there. So if you're here to get a little pick-me-up, this is the program for you. If you're here because your marriage is really struggling, it's starving, it may not make it many years longer or many months longer, then sit with us and sit tight, because I promise there are some answers here that are unique to you and your spouse that will start to unleash and open up a lot of the cool things that's the reason you got married. Make sure as you're going through the program that you really get focused. We only have an hour together, and in this 1 hour, if you can learn to be your best you and figure out what just the secrets are and how they relate to your relationship, you're going to see some changes, at least some changes in how you see marriage and how you see moving forward with your partner. So turn your phone off. Make sure you have some free space, some free time somewhere to work. I want you to have some paper as well and a pen to write these things down, just so that you can go over it and make sure that you can use it and implement it in your marriage. Really, the ultimate objective of the program is to help you. I get to do this and have been doing it for 25 years. And what I have found is there's no greater joy in life than seeing somebody figure out how to improve their most important relationships. Everything we teach you here is for marriage. It's also for your dating relationships. It works really well, honestly, with parenting as well as dealing with your parents. It's just about difficult conversations and difficult relationships. So stick with us on that. Little overview for you. The program's only going to go about 1 hour long. As part of the program, we'll be talking about how did I start this program? Who's Matt Townsend, Dr. Matt, and what have I been doing? How did I get to this point? Also, we're going to be talking about what is a starved marriage. You've heard me mention it 2 or 3 times. We're going to walk you through the acronym of what starved means and how to actually change it. We're also going to talk about your marriage specifically. Are you starving in your marriage? And I'll give you a quick little assessment that you can run through to identify if you do have some of the starved stuff going on. We will get into then the 3 secrets that I've been talking about, the 3 secrets that will help you start to feed your marriage and take it in a completely different direction. I'll even show you how I came to know these. It's going to be very basic. None of this is going to be like, what? I've never thought about that. The problem is we don't think about it in the way that we need to implement it, and our implementation isn't usually as keen as it needs to be. So I'll show you how we can get into the secrets, and you're specifically going to find out exactly how to implement every one of these secrets in your marriage. As we're going through the program, we're also going to give you an in-depth view of the entire full program of Feeding the Starved Marriage. It's our digital program. It's about 12 hours long. The webinar we're doing right now is only about an hour long, so we can't get to all of the solutions that are included in our digital program. But what you will get is a good understanding, a pretty strong understanding of what's in the program as well. And you're going to be able to start to integrate that into your life. So make sure to stay with us through the entire webinar. You're not only going to get all of the content I've been talking about, but at the very end, I'm going to give an exclusive offer on the price of the program, the full digital Feeding the Starved Marriage program, so that you can get a great discount and a great price so you and your partner can immediately get started on this tonight and start improving your relationship immediately. The neat thing about everything we're talking about is it is immediate. This isn't brain surgery. You don't need to schedule an appointment with a surgeon and then schedule an appointment with the doctor and then get in there and then get to the hospital and then have the surgery and then recover. It doesn't work that way. The neat thing about truth truth and the neat thing about some of these secrets we're going to be giving you, you can get started immediately. And I promise you, just what we're about to talk about as we get into the secrets, it'll unleash a lot of issues and problems that you've probably been hanging on to and not even knowing why they were sticking around. So I've been doing this a long time. And one of the things I hear a lot from the clients I work with, why is it that I just can't have the relationship we used to have? I just want what we used to have. It's not that big of a deal. I just want to be able to communicate and always think the best of each other. If you feel like you've fallen out of love, if you feel like you just don't have what you used to have, this is the way we're going to teach it to you. The webinar, we will walk you through the steps and introduce you to the full digital program at the very end. So one of the things I want you to be thinking about, and I use this idea with everybody that I sit down with in my offices and in my large group meetings, I want you to imagine, what if you and your partner could effectively talk through all of your biggest issues? What if you and your partner could effectively come up with solutions to your problems and actually communicate and solve an issue that comes up out of nowhere? What if you could be on the same page? What would all of that be worth to you? What would it be doing to your marriage and to your relationship if you were able to actually talk? And talk in such a way that problems were no longer having to linger for years, that trust was growing, that understanding was there, and that you were both benefiting. What kind of impact would that have? Because if you have been trying to do this for years, if you've gone to a lot of therapists and it didn't seem to help, if you've read every book there is on it, if you haven't, but you've listened to Dr. Phil and Dr. Lara and all of these great experts, but nothing's been changing, then sit tight and get ready, because we are about to create some pretty powerful changes in you and in your relationship. So let's get started on the training right now. Let me start out by introducing myself. My name is Matt Townsend. Many call me Dr. Matt, and I'm an author. I'm a PhD. I have a radio show. I've kind of done a lot of stuff to get these messages out. My ultimate joy in life is to be a coach, a relationship coach, to be able to sit down with a couple who's struggling but love each other and want to figure out how to make something work and actually make something work. So a lot of this comes from my childhood. My parents divorced when I was 8 years old. They separated when I was 6. And I grew up with parents living in different homes, and it was hard. And I could never understand how these people that I love so much couldn't seem to get along. And it frustrated me. How come other parents weren't divorcing? How come only my parents are divorcing? So I grew up very sensitive to looking at relationships. I became the kid in the neighborhood that watched everyone else's parents to see how they related. I'd go have a sleepover, and I'd be watching the parents. A lot of the parents is like, that Townsend kid's kind of creepy. He's always watching us. But the reality of it all is I was passionate about relationships. They seemed to matter to me at a level that I didn't see with my friends or really any of my family. I wanted to get so much information about relationships that I started studying them and got very into them. In fact, I remember when I was 18 years old, I started reading a book called The 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. It was a great book, a lot about relationships. I'll tell you where that went for me eventually in my life over time. But I started to get into these relationships. When I had a chance, I went to college. I got a bachelor's degree in journalism and communications. I got a master's degree in conflict resolution because, by golly, I wanted to help people learn to talk because I didn't want to run into what my mom and dad ran into. I decided I wanted more education and more information. I went on to get a master's degree in human development and eventually a doctorate in human and organizational systems. I really felt called and compelled to try my best to help people and relationships to talk. The problem was there wasn't a job back then for somebody that just helps people talk. Somebody said you ought to be a lawyer, so I looked into law school and I realized, I don't want to do that the rest of my life. They don't seem to help people talk. A lot of times lawyers just seem to help people fight. Others said you need to be a therapist. So I went and studied therapy and learned a lot about Freud and realized I don't want to be a part of that either. I wasn't into the therapeutic side of it. I just wanted to help people talk. Well, job didn't exist then. So I went on, got another master's degree in human development that I was talking about, and went to work for a company called Franklin Covey Company. And Franklin Covey, one of the CEOs and the leaders of the company, company was a man named Stephen Covey, who wrote that book that I read when I was 18 years old called The 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. Pretty quickly, I worked my way up the ladder there, eventually started becoming a corporate trainer for them. I actually got to work with Stephen Covey on books as a book writer and a book developer, and I used to travel around the country teaching their leadership workshops to people all over the country. And it really started to teach me a very powerful thing. People want to learn. People will pay to learn these skills and this information. I started actually sitting down with corporate executives that couldn't talk to their more difficult employees, and I created a bridge of communication for these people. I started taking all of this education that I had, all of these skills that I had, and working with people. It was the most magical time of my life. I felt empowered and called to do something than to take the principles of effective communication and get them to the people. Well, after traveling the country and the world really for about 7 to 8 years with Franklin Covey, I decided at my very young age, by the way, that I needed to move on. This wasn't helping couples like I wanted to help couples. And I saw a billboard on the side of the road that talked about mediation. If you're thinking of getting a divorce, try mediation instead of litigation. And I thought, well, that sounds like a cool idea. Maybe I could become a mediator. I then went out, took my graduate degrees, and went and started mediating divorces for people. And honestly, worst job I've ever had. To sit down with people and watch them fight, it drove me crazy, especially when I had all of these conflict resolution and communication tools we should be teaching them. This was all about 17 years ago. I decided no more. I'm not going to help people divorce anymore. After 2 years of walking them through the steps of divorce, I decided I'm going to just start teaching them how to talk. Everybody that came to me, I sat them down and I slowly started teaching them the skills and the tools. And I told them I would only do it if you wanted me to help you with the divorce, you've got to know how to communicate for yourself, for your kids, for your future. So I started teaching them the skills, and over time, as I was going through the divorce process, I noticed these couples were learning it. And they were learning to communicate at a higher level than they had ever seen before. They were the happiest people you've ever seen divorcing. They were on the same page. They actually fought a lot less, and it made my job easier. But I'm like, okay, I can't now just create happy divorces. We've got to take these ideas and move them in to the mainstream America. And that's what I decided to do. So about 15 years ago, I quit doing any divorces at all. And all I've been doing ever since is teaching couples the art of communicating and the art of feeding a relationship that's starving and starting to spiral. And the coolest thing about it is I'm not even a therapist. I never took a class in therapy because I didn't want that responsibility. I didn't believe, and that becomes one of our secrets we'll talk about today, that talking about your problem is the only way to resolve a problem. What I found is there are some pretty powerful solutions, and a lot of the great researchers that are researching at universities every day have found answers to the problems you are already suffering with in your marriage. The problem with all of them is nobody's talking about them. Nobody's sharing them. Nobody's doing anything with all of this information, which is what I decided to do. Somebody needed to stand up and be the voice of these skills. And that's when I started a radio show. I've been doing it now for 10 years. It's a national radio show. It's on satellite radio. I have 3 hours a day. You also can pick it up on podcast. It's everywhere. And I started traveling the country. I eventually wrote a book called The Starved Stuff that we'll talk about. The entire program is based on the book. And I started getting the skills out there, all the research-based ideas, and we started solving the problems that couples really had and that couples needed solved. And the coolest thing about it is it's not going to be me doing all the work. You're going to learn how to do it, and then you're going to learn how to actually create the marriage you've always wanted to have. So not only have I got the degrees and the titles and all of the education and training with some of the best training companies around, the most important thing that I have ever been given or blessed with is a marriage that's working and healthy. The number one thing is 26 years of marriage with my wife, Marty. We have 6 children. We know how to make this work. We're not perfect at it, but the difference with going through the program and knowing what I know is I know when I'm not doing it right. And by the way, so does my wife. And I know when she's not doing it right. So when we start using the skills together, it's amazing what can happen. 26 years from a kid who was born into the family that didn't know how to do this, and now I know how to do it, and I'm handing it down to my kids. Honestly, it's my greatest gift and my greatest joy is to know that it's going to make a difference. And I promise we'll make a difference in your family as well if you'll help me to live these things and learn the content we're going to give you in the webinar. So one of the things I found as I've been working with couples is there's a difference between coaching and therapy. If you're a field goal kicker and you are on your team and you keep struggling to kick that field goal through the upright, it's a problem, isn't it? At some point, we got to kick the field goal through the upright. But if I'm the coach, my job would be to come over and see that you lack some initial skills, some training, some ability to get this thing done, to get that ball through the field goal. If I'm a therapist, my assumption is that there's something of your childhood, something from your past that needs to be uncovered in order to help you undo these things. And what I have found as I have had thousands of people come through my office, all of them struggling, many divorces that we did back in the day, and every one of those having been through therapy, in the end, at some point, we need skills. We need to know how to do the hard stuff. And coaches tend to focus on the skills instead of the therapy. I refer a lot of people out to therapy if after I've met them and worked with them, if I found that they have a therapeutic issue. But in the end, this is about changing your marriage today. If you sit in your relationship and you wonder, man, why are my neighbors so much happier than I am? They seem to be on Facebook, that's for sure. Or if you feel like you've fallen out of love, or you ask yourself, relationships shouldn't be this hard. Why is this so hard? Or you just want to have what you used to have, like we were talking about. Or my husband or my wife, they just don't understand me like others do. Or we can't talk. I would promise you that each one of those issues are skill related as well. There might be a therapeutic issue in some of them, but each one of those have skills. And the difference between being a healthy marriage and a dysfunctional marriage, it's not always whether you had a bad childhood, because people with a bad childhood could still have a highly functioning marriage. It's whether you have the ability, the skills, and the principles to make this stuff happen. Ask yourself, what would it mean to your marriage if you could start talking without a fight? What would this mean to your children? If you could start handing down a tradition of effective communication, what would it mean to your grandchildren who saw 2 or 3 generations of it working? What greater gift could you hand down to your kids than the ability to actually work through your issues with your spouse or the people you care about instead of always fighting or flighting? And that's the skills we're going to talk about. And those are the 3 secrets we need to unveil. What are the 3 secrets? Very simply, here they are. We're going to go through each of them in depth. 3 secrets to help you start feeding your starved marriage. Secret number 1, we've got to start focusing on the fire and not the smoke. Secret number 2, we have to empower solutions, not just problems. It's not enough to talk about your problems. You got to solve things. And principle number 3, you have to pay attention to the patterns of your relationship, the patterns of your communication, the patterns of life. So let's get into these one by one. First, starting on focusing on the fire and not the smoke. So before we can get too deep into the first secret, I got to tell you a story about my firstborn, my oldest child. I have 6 children, 1 daughter and 5 boys. And my oldest child is wonderful. She's gifted, a beautiful, talented daughter named Sarah. And she brings back so many great memories, because you know that first child's the one you test everything on. The first child's the one you sometimes do it wrong with. So she made it through our parenting. She made it through life, and she got engaged to be married to this wonderful boy named Brady Davies. I'll never forget, in fact, when Brady came to meet with me to ask me if I would give my daughter's hand to him to marry her, I will never forget the peace I felt as I said, yeah. I mean, that's a weird moment, right? And I hand my daughter basically over to Brady, and it's for a very basic reason, because Brady, I know, was willing to live these secrets as well, and willing to learn them if he didn't have them. But more importantly, he was willing to live the principle. So after they were getting married, or as they were getting married, we were having a family dinner. And at the family dinner, my daughter asked me to say a few words as the father of the bride, and I started panicking. So what does the relationship coach say at his daughter's wedding? What advice do I give if I can only give a little bit of advice? In the end, I told my daughter on her wedding night in front of hundreds of people, your peace in life will never come from another person or your partner. My daughter's ability to feel peace will not come from her husband. Her ability to have lasting peace and lasting wellness in a relationship comes from the principles and following the promptings and living the principles that create peace. The peace never comes from people. It never comes from our positions. It doesn't come from how much money we have. The peace comes from the principles. The principles that when we live them, create the actual results, create the benefits and the value that we want. So as I'm talking to her, it dawns on me, the only thing that really matters are the principles that bring the peace. And so of these 3 secrets we're going to be sharing with you, there's principles deeply embedded in each one of them. You need to be listening for the principle, the universal truth that will start to pay the dividends. And the first principle, if you remember, is we need to focus on the fire, not the smoke. The reality is when people come and see me, they always bring me their issues. They talk about money problems, they talk about sex issues, they talk about their kids, their inability to discipline. I've heard just about every issue you can imagine. And after thousands of people sit in front of you and start to tell you their stories over and over, you start to see the principles appear. You start to see the patterns taking place. Couples would come in and they would talk about all of their pain, all of their issues, infidelities, all of the problems, and they'd get so caught up in the problems that I started seeing that it was acting as smoke, that it was turning into this interference, and it was starting to create more and more complication. Let me give you an example of the smoke. So a couple comes into me, and the wife had just bought a $400 purse. And the husband sits down, I'm like, what can I help you with? And they immediately start telling me the smoke. He says it's her purse. She just bought a $400 purse. That's ridiculous. Who needs a $400 purse? Nobody needs a $400 purse. And she immediately rolls her eyes and she says, it's not a purse. It's a bag. It's a bag. We don't call it a purse. And the husband said, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter if it's a purse or a bag. Nobody needs to spend $400 on a bag. That is so dumb. Why did you do that? And then the wife got so mad. She was livid. And she's just like, are you kidding me? You're going to argue with me about a $400 purse? Yeah, because we don't need it. What a waste. And then she says, oh, really? How much was your golf bag? How much was that bag? And he's like, what? Right then, amazingly, he couldn't hear. He couldn't hear what she was saying. What do you mean, how much was my bag? You just said I don't need a $400 bag, so I want to know how much your golf bag was. And he's like, I don't know, maybe $370? $370 is $400, you dork. No, it's not. It's $370. No, it's $400. No, it's $370. So now notice what they're fighting about. Notice we're not even on bags anymore, or purses, or $400. We're on the difference between $400 and $370. They were actually arguing now about how you round certain numbers. And if you round $30, we're going to fight about that. Anytime you're fighting about something as irrelevant as a $30 rounding of a number, you're in what I call the smoke. You're not dealing with the real issue. They would love to solve it. They've never been able to solve it before. You can't take the bait and chase all the smoke. You've got to notice that wherever there's smoke, there's fire. The number one killer of people in a marriage, in communication, is when we chase the smoke, right? Instead of getting to the real issue, the deep issue deep down. The number one killer of people in a house fire is the smoke as well. People die from smoke inhalation long before they die from burns. The reality of this marriage is they're dying and they're fighting about smoke when really this house is going up in flames. Eventually, he defends his golf bag. I need a $370 golf bag because I put like $2,000 worth of clubs in that bag. Holy cow. And I thought to myself, oh, you dumb man. Why did you just say that? Here we go. And all of a sudden they started to fight about $2,000 on golf clubs, back and forth, until finally somebody started to cry. I won't tell you which one it was. And she ended up saying, you always did love golfing more than me. Then it became about golfing. So do you notice what is the real issue? What is the real core problem that we're fighting about? I've been calling the program Feeding the Starved Marriage all the way through the webinar so far, and I'm now going to let you in on the little secret of what the starved stuff is. Every human being has 7 basic needs, very basic issues that we have. And if these needs aren't met, then we start to feel starved. And when these needs are met, we start to feel loved. Love is meeting 7 needs. When the needs aren't met, what I teach is I don't care why you're not meeting these 7 needs. If you're not meeting them, it's going to cause problems for you and your relationship in your marriage. The 7 basic needs are simply these. Every relationship on earth has got to feel safe. Think about it. How do you deal with a relationship where you don't feel safe? Safe means we're safe physically, so we're not going to be harmed. We're safe socially, so we're not going to be embarrassed by the other. We're safe emotionally so we can share what's in our heart. We're safe financially so we have enough money. And we're safe spiritually so we have the same value system. Ask yourself, are you safe with your partner? No matter what you fight about in the smoke, are you safe with each other? The second basic need is trust. Do you trust each other? Long-term relationships require that we trust one another. Trust simply means that I trust two things in you. I trust your character so I know you're honest and you're decent. And I trust your competency so I know that you know how to be my partner. You're competent, you're clued in, you're good at this. Safety and trust. Think about your partner. Do you trust your partner's character and do you trust their competency? Because if you don't, it creates problems. How do you communicate with somebody you don't trust? What do you say to somebody that you don't trust or that doesn't trust you? The third basic need is appreciation. Everybody wants to feel appreciated. Do you feel like your value in your relationship is appreciating? Is it getting better and better, like a really good 401k? Or is it starting to depreciate in value? To be appreciated, I need to be loved my way. You need to be loved your way. Everybody has a different way, a desire to be loved. And does my partner know how I want to be loved? And do they appreciate me my way? When you see couples fighting about sex and who initiates sex, I'm going to bet it's really an appreciation issue. Or when we fight about who's doing the most chores around the home, it's probably an appreciation issue. So think about it with your partner. Do you feel like your partner appreciates you and loves you your way? Do they even know what way your way is? And do you appreciate them? 3 basic needs so far: safety, trust, appreciation. Do you see how these are probably the bigger issues instead of fighting about golf clubs and bags and purses? Things are much deeper. And so when we learn the first secret of focusing on the fire and getting down to the needs of safety, trust, and appreciation, you're going to start cutting through the fight a lot faster. The 4th basic need is respect. Do you feel like your partner respects you? Do they see you with a sense of reverence? Do they see you with respect? Do they get you? Do they care what you think? Do they not make a decision without you because they respect your opinion? Or do they just say disrespectful things and blow you up? Safety, trust, appreciation, respect. V stands for validation. In long-term relationships, you both have to feel like you're valid. You both have to feel like you have an opinion and your opinion matters and it's valid. It doesn't mean it's always right, but it's yours and it's how you see the world. Do you feel like you're valid when you talk to your partner? Or do you feel like a lot of times they have to invalidate you? Do you feel your partner encourages you? The next basic need is encouragement. Long-term relationships require that we encourage one another, that we're cheerleaders for each other. If your partner wants to go back to school, we encourage that. We encourage their growth. We encourage their development. Do you feel like your partner encourages you? And do you encourage your partner the way they want to be encouraged? And last but not least is dedication. The 7th basic need is dedication. I need to know that you're more committed to me than any other person, place, or thing. Are you dedicated to me, your spouse? And that's hard because when we start having children, a lot of times one parent becomes so much more dedicated to the kids and the other parent maybe becomes more dedicated to their work, and we start to pull away. And that dedication issue makes us fight about children and parenting and fight about work schedules, when in reality our issue is a dedication issue. Think about all 7 of those basic needs and go through them in your own marriage. Are you safe? Do you trust your partner? Do you feel appreciated, respected, validated, encouraged? And do you feel your partner is dedicated to you? Because if these needs are not being met, then you're probably starving. And if you're starving, your partner is probably starving. One of the governing rules of starved stuff is that starved people starve people. In your marriage, if these needs aren't being met for you, you're going to start to starve your partner. It's going to create bigger and bigger problems for you. I've seen thousands of couples go through this. When one of them doesn't feel safe, they immediately disrespect the other and they say something rude. And when you disrespect me, then I'm not going to be nice to you. I'm not going to be dedicated to you. And when you're not dedicated to me, I don't trust you. And it starts what we call a starved spiral. And in the program, the full program that we go through, we get in depth into finding out your spiral. What's triggering your spiral? What's causing you to slowly go down the drain in this relationship? And the dilemma becomes where we start to cause more pain on our partner, and the justification we use is because I'm hurting. You hurt me, then I'm going to hurt you. What kind of impact can you imagine it would have on your marriage if you could learn to cut through the smoke? If you could do nothing else, but you and your partner could quit fighting about all the smoke that irritates us, that makes us choke, that makes us want to leave the conversation, and actually get down and have a really grown-up conversation about if your partner feels safe and if you feel trusted and appreciated, if you feel respected. If you could get down to that, what impact would it have on you? What would it do to your ability to talk with one another and to actually create some powerful change? There's a great metaphor I use when I talk about this. It goes back to a quote I once heard that says, "When are you going to stop swatting at the flies and go and patch the screen?" Imagine if you went to a backwoods cabin, some cabin deep in the woods, and you went inside and there were tons and tons of flies everywhere. I guess we could just start killing flies, right? And just start pounding on the flies until we have the floor covered in flies. The problem with it is, as long as there's holes in the screens, the flies are just going to keep coming in. So what we want to do when we start focusing on this first secret is, let's go fix the problem, which is the starved stuff, and let's look at that stuff. Let's patch those screens, and immediately, let's start to see what happens next. Then you can go kill all the flies you want. One by one, you can pick them off because you can tie them to one of your partner's starved issues. It's a pretty powerful thing, and in the end, it's something I don't see happening in most cases with therapy. We end up getting into so many other side discussions about the real deep issue, supposedly, something that came from the childhood, but in reality, it's probably a safety issue. It's a trust issue. It's an appreciation, respect, validation, encouragement, and dedication issue. When I work with people and I could finally see that we could cut through the smoke and get down to the starved stuff, I quickly realized we may have fixed a problem. There's a great quote that says, "You can't meet a need that you don't understand." And just because you understand a need doesn't mean you need to meet it. You can't actually meet your partner's needs if we don't understand what their needs are. And those 7 basic needs are so basic to humanity that all you have to start doing is listening for one of those needs as they're telling the story about the golf clubs or the purse. He probably had a financial safety issue with her spending $400. She probably felt disrespected and invalidated. She felt like she's not safe enough to even have her own purses without him making a big fuss about it. And if we could actually start to show our partner that that's normal, we can have that. The real issue wasn't about the money. There's a great thought that money always replenishes itself, right? So money eventually is going to pay for itself. You're going to have your check right now, but eventually the money's going to come in for next month and we'll have the money as long as we're spending correctly, right? Money is just going to keep coming in. The thing that doesn't automatically replenish itself, though, is safety. Safety doesn't naturally get another dose of safety next month. And trust doesn't naturally come and drop off a big dose of trust for you and your partner next month. Those things have to be replenished intentionally. So as you sit there and couples come in and argue about the money issues, the irony of it deep down, the bigger issues they're never dealing with are the ones that are eventually going to cost them the most money. Those are the ones where you need to spend a lot of money on therapy or a divorce because you don't have the safety, the trust, and the appreciation. So we have to start paying attention to those things that don't make too much noise until we get deeper into it. As a challenge for you, as I recap this, and as you begin to listen to each other, please start listening to your partner for their starved issues and communicate your starved issues more directly. If you're starving about how much money is being spent in the home, don't talk about the money, but talk about how unsafe you feel financially. Cut down and get to the real issue, because once you do, you're going to make the communication so much more efficient, especially once your partner knows what the starved stuff is. Then you guys can start cutting through and getting to some clarity and some understanding about our deeper issues much more quickly. So a little challenge for you is over the next few weeks, listen to everything other people are saying to you. When they bring you a lot of negative emotion, when they start bringing you a lot of pain, try to hear where they're starving and then show them, it sounds like you feel unsafe. Tell me more about that, and hold that up and let them start to clarify for you. When they do, you'll see amazing things happen as the smoke starts to dissipate and you literally can start to just slowly put the fire out. Once the smoke's out of the way, you can see the fire and we can get to it. It's pretty powerful. So the first secret, remember, is to cut through the smoke and get down to the real fire. Because this is just a 1-hour webinar. We don't have time to get into the full Feeding the Starved Marriage program, the in-depth digital program that I'll be talking about and offering you a great price on at the end of the program. But one of the things that we do in the full program is we teach one of my favorite skill sets, which is called Getting Real Understanding. It's the tools to actually cut through the smoke and get down to the starve stuff. It's where we teach you to recognize emotion and then explore the story behind the emotion and attend to the starve stuff and lift the conversation upwards. Getting real conversations is how you get out of the smoke. Just identifying that you're in the smoke versus the fire is a great first step, which is why it's one of the first secrets we're teaching you. But getting through and getting real communication, it's powerful and it's there. And it really takes about 4 to 5 hours of content to get into it and to practice it with you. But it will help you create real emotion and real understanding about the smoke and the fire that's going on in your marriage. The second secret to help you start feeding the starved marriage is to empower solutions, not problems. At the very beginning of the program, as I was talking about coaching, I brought this up a little bit, but you need to empower solutions, not problems. Believe me, as a person that has sat down with thousands of people in major problems, talking about problems does not fix problems. We've got to be very clear here. Talking about your problems doesn't fix the problem. At some point, you need to talk about solutions to the problems if you actually want to fix them. So many people believe, no, if we can just talk, we'll talk about what? Talk about how broken you are? Talk about how starved you are? At some point, if you want to know how to fix a problem, you've got to know what it would look like if it was no longer a problem. That's called a solution. So what I try to do is guide my clients into using the time that they're talking and getting real understanding. I want them to use that time to start actually solving problems. Let me give you a good example of this. It's kind of coaching 101. There was a football coach named Jimmy Johnson who was the coach for the Miami Hurricanes. He eventually went on to the NFL and worked with the Dallas Cowboys and eventually won Super Bowls. But he had a problem as a coach. He had one of his running backs would fumble the ball all of the time. And it was frustrating Jimmy Johnson, this incredible coach. And so Jimmy, on the way out, as the guy was running out to the huddle to start out on offense, Jimmy would yell out the statement, "Don't fumble the ball. Don't fumble the ball." Notice what Jimmy was telling the boy. Was Jimmy focusing on solutions or problems? The boy's problem was he would fumble the ball. So every single time Jimmy was trying to fix the problem by saying, "Don't do that," guess what happened? He put the idea in the boy's head. Fumble the ball. Fumble it. You can't teach a negative. You can't fix a negative. So the only way to fix something is to identify what its answer is or what the positive solution would be. A sports psychologist eventually went up to Jimmy Johnson and said, "Jimmy, you ought not be doing that. Quit telling the boy not to fumble the ball, or he's just going to keep fumbling the ball. Instead, tell the boy to hold on to the football. Hold on to the football. Hold on to the football." Now notice how simple that is. Holding on to the football is the solution. Telling somebody not to do something isn't the solution. That's the problem. Now, I see this all the time in our marriages. You tell your husband how many times you're so sick and tired of X and X happening. "Don't do this. I'm so tired of you always wanting sex," and da-da-da. You never want sex. So we fight about the problem of never wanting sex. When somebody is complaining that we never have sex, what they're telling you is they want more intimacy. They want more sex. When your wife is telling you, "I could have sex a lot easier if you would help me around the house more," instead of just sitting there in the recliner, she's telling you what she needs you to do instead of what you shouldn't be doing. Anytime you focus on problems and you don't start to create the solution and talk about the solutions, I promise you, you're wasting your time. You're actually wasting your energy, which is why this is a secret. When I empower solutions to take place, amazingly, they do. One of the great researchers in the field of marriage and family is Dr. John Gottman. And he did some pretty interesting research. He said, when you get into a marriage, 70% of our problems are solvable. So any marriage is going to have a bunch of problems, okay? It's just life. It's just how it works. 70% of those problems are solvable, meaning parenting issues are solvable. Issues like money issues, budgeting issues are solvable. Communication issues are solvable. There's certain things that we can actually fix and go in and handle. 70% of them are fixable. 30%, though, he called perpetual problems. 30% of our problems are things that aren't going to be fixed. They're things you can't change, okay? If your partner was abused as a child, which is maybe one reason why they don't feel very safe sharing their feelings with you, or maybe why intimacy is hard for them. You can't change whether they've been abused or not. That's kind of a perpetual issue. You can change how you handle it. You can change how you work around it. But the problem is going to be there. If my parents, because my parents divorced, that's a problem my wife and I can't fix. In our marriage, I'm a child of divorce. And so that's something we're not going to fix. If somebody is religious and goes to a certain church, they may not be willing to ever give that up. That's a perpetual type of issue. It doesn't mean you can't make them better and fix and handle the situations better. It just means you probably ought to quit trying to fix it. Some of those perpetual problems, they're not going to go away. There's a great quote that says, "It's not the snake that bites you that kills you. It's chasing the snake that drives the venom to the heart." See, a snake biting you is not necessarily going to kill you. If you immediately get into the car and somebody drives you to the hospital and you get anti-venom in you, guess what? You're probably going to be fine. You're going to make it. But if you don't do all of those things and instead you start chasing that snake and fighting that snake, and for 2.5 hours you run up a mountain trying to kill a snake and exert yourself and push all of that blood through your system and all of that poison through your system, you're probably going to die. The same thing is true when it comes to your marriages. If you keep chasing the problems grow. If you start chasing solutions, the solutions tend to shrink the problems. Make sense? Isn't that just common sense? So here's an example. I had a couple come and see me. They had been married 30 years. They had fought about everything. There was infidelity in the marriage, and the infidelity was about 10 years ago. So for 10 years, both partners had been faithful to each other, but the one partner that wasn't unfaithful still hadn't been able to get over the infidelity. It was bothering her so much. And it was starting to frustrate the husband. Like, I remember him saying, and I could not believe he said it, "When are you going to get over this? It's been 10 years. I've been faithful for 10 years. Get over it." And I remember how mad she was. Because, by the way, notice, they're not dealing with the starved stuff, are they? She has a safety issue. She has a trust issue. She has a respect issue. He has an encouragement issue. He has a dedication issue. Is she now dedicated? And they would break down and they would cry. So eventually I had to figure out a way around this. I couldn't have them keep bringing up an issue that was constantly sucking the life out of her. So instead of trying to get problem talk about why this is so hard for her, I asked her a very simple question. What would you need to see happening in your marriage that, if it was happening regularly, would make you believe and know that your husband is faithful to you and that he really is truly dedicated and devoted to you? Now, he thought he had asked this question for years, but apparently he hadn't, and he was so curious to find out what this woman had to say. So he leans in and she just shakes her head and she starts to cry. And she says he would listen to me. He would look at me in my eyes. He would touch me. He would care for me. He wouldn't yell at me. He wouldn't immediately come in and get on the TV and ignore me all night. He would ask me the questions. He would try to understand what I meant by this or that. I would see patience in him. She said we'd hold hands more. We would touch more. You'd be into me. We'd talk positively. We'd go on walks with each other like we used to. And he started going down the entire list. And as he was hearing this for the first time, trying to hear what she needed to see, it was the first time it dawned on him that he hasn't been showing her he loves her. He comes home every night. He makes a good living. He takes care of the house. He goes out and does the yard work. He's there, but he's not doing anything that would solve it for her, that would show her that she's a priority. And the amazing thing about it, those were all things that he used to do. See, when we're first in love, we always were doing the things that work. And then eventually we get into trouble and we don't do it anymore. So we have to focus on solutions, not problems. Here's an activity for you. At the end of your day, what I want you to start to do is decide. You're either going to have great excuses for why you've got a bad marriage, or you're going to have a great marriage. You got to decide. Either go with the excuses, so every night start making up excuses of why your marriage is miserable, the problems, or start identifying 2 or 3 things a day that show you your marriage is pretty good. And start making a list of those things. And eventually, what I think you're going to find out as you start compiling the list over time, things are pretty good for you. So in the full digital Feeding the Starved Marriage program, we get in depth into this. Again, remember the 1-hour webinar I'm teaching you right now, we can't get into as much depth, but you just found some simple things that could be done. In the full program, we get into some other things like holding and pouring. We talk about the holding problems each of us might have that makes it hard to hold the love of our partner, or how to pour more love into my partner's relationship and into their lives. We help you identify the holes that you might have in your bucket that keep you from holding love. Holes like just being too busy, or some physiological needs, or psychological issues, or ignorance or addictions, anything that might get in the way of keeping the love from flowing in your relationship. We talk about what we call a T-chart, and a tool that helps you identify immediately 3 things a night that you write down on the chart to communicate to your partner what you love about them. We also get into what I call loving rituals and the food pyramid, and we have you identify with your partner rituals and traditions that feed your marriage that you can do every single day, 3 times a day, every single week, 1 to 2 times a week, 1 to 2 times a month, 2 to 3 times a year. The rituals and the traditions that you guys do daily, weekly, monthly, yearly are what are going to change the relationship and keep it being fed. We help you build your own food pyramid to make sure that your relationship is being fed on all of those levels. All of those tools are there. It's just all part of living this very basic principle of focusing on the solutions, not the problems. Secret number 3, very basic, but very important. Pay attention to the patterns. As I sit with couples, I see patterns that take place. And over time, after many, many, many couples have gone and come and gone, you start to see that many of them are doing the exact same patterns. Those patterns then become habits. For some, they become ruts. So you can start to notice the rut. Think about driving down a road. If you've ever been down a dirt road, you see the rut that's been just slowly worn down in the road. I've seen ruts that have been worn down in marble, slates of marble, stairs of marble, because people just keep using the same pattern of going up the stairs. The ruts are dangerous. There's a great sign at the front of a wildlife preserve in Alaska, and the sign says, "Choose your rut carefully, because you'll be in it for hundreds of miles." If you knew that you had to drive hundreds of miles in a rut, you better choose the rut carefully. Make sure you're choosing the most effective, healthy way to get through this situation. Most couples I've found, they don't have healthy ruts. They tend to react into their ruts. They have certain patterns that they follow, certain things that they do that keep cutting them off, that keep impacting them. One of the ruts that we see that is most common is a conflict resolution rut. When times are tough and an issue starts to create irritation with one of us or both of us, we fall into this very basic rut. We think we're fighting about money, but really what ends up happening is we start taking on behaviors. The behaviors come from and are triggered by our starved stuff. When I feel starved, I'm going to start behaving certain ways, usually fairly reactive ways that I'm not proud of. And so in most conflict resolution, we've got to help you see the pattern. The most common pattern we see is where one person becomes a pursuer. The pursuer is what we call the talker. The talker is the one that wants answers. The talker is the one that on any issue of smoke, they're the one that will probably initiate it. They'll initiate it on their time frame. They'll initiate it at their speed, at their tone. Whenever they want to, they start pursuing. The pursuers want to pursue because they want progress. They want this thing fixed. Think about it in your marriage. Who's the pursuer? Who's the one that's most likely to bring up the issue, to start talking about it? Now, wherever you have a pursuer, you tend to have what we call a withdrawer. The withdrawer is the one that doesn't want to have this conversation. La, 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 la. They just want to cover their ears and walk away. For every pursuer, there's a withdrawer, and for every withdrawer, there tends to be a pursuer. Who in your marriage is most likely to be a withdrawer? When the issue is brought up, which one of you is most likely to ignore it, to walk away, to run away, to escape, or to never come home? Statistically, 70% of the time, women are the pursuer when it comes to conflict in a marriage. When they feel unsafe, they tend to pursue. 70% of the time, men are the withdrawer. They tend to want to run away. They don't want to go there. And for a variety of reasons and just how we've learned to communicate, men tend to be a little bit more reactive, a little more fight or flight. So sometimes it's harder for them in the moment to keep it cool and to actually listen through it. The problem is, though, when you have a pursuer and a withdrawer, it creates a pattern of destruction. And the pattern goes very simply like this. The pursuer chases the withdrawer and the withdrawer runs. I call that stage one. That's the chaser. We have the chasing stage where one of us has got to have the conversation and one of us starts running. And then we just keep running around, just going as far as we can. Eventually, though, that person, what happens when you corner the withdrawer? You corner them at 11 o'clock at night and keep saying, we're going to have this conversation. And a lot of times they'll come back and you two will finally have a conversation. But it usually doesn't go very well, does it? It actually turns into a collision and it turns into a big, gnarly fight. And that is where, boom, there's an explosion and a lot of smoke is generated. And then in the middle of all the smoke, the withdrawer runs away, which was their initial goal, right? And they finally got what they wanted. And then the pursuer, they withdraw. And now look how far apart you both are. Everyone's withdrawn, and the issue about money, sex, or kids, or whatever you guys fight about, falls on the ground unresolved. Some couples do this for years. Some do it just for a few years, and then they just learn to ignore each other, and they abandon ever trying to fix it. They just avoid, and they stay withdrawn. Some do the chase every single day. Some fight every single day. What is your pattern? Think about how you two handle the conflict. One of the things I want you to pay attention to as we've gone through this program is not every couple fights, but that doesn't necessarily mean you're healthy. Some couples would never fight because they're not pursuers. They're just both withdrawers. They just don't ever fight. Now, some maybe don't ever have an issue to fight about because we all agree on everything. But be careful, because just because you don't argue doesn't mean you're healthy. You need conflict. There should be some differences between you and your partner somewhere in the marriage. You may not have run into them yet, but don't get too comfortable because you will. So many times I've seen couples that have been married 30 years. I've had couples come to me that were married 55 years. At 55 years of marriage, at 75 plus years, they finally ran into an issue they don't agree on, and where one partner started to voice. So be careful when you think about these patterns. The pattern is fairly simple, and I once asked a vet, because the pattern reminded me of a dog chasing a tail. The dog is just chasing that darn tail, and it's going to chase it till it gets it. One time I sat and I asked a veterinarian why dogs chase their tail. And he said, well, not all dogs will chase their tail, right? And I'm like, no, I didn't know that. But he said only dogs that have a prey drive, an instinct to chase prey, those dogs will chase their tail. But the reality is some of us are so reactive to each other, we learn to just chase. We learn to, or just to run, but we never learn to come together and have the conversation. If we don't ever come together and have the conversation, we're setting ourselves up. We're in trouble, which is why this last secret is so essential. You have to pay attention and focus to your patterns because they will make you or they will break you. In every pattern that happens over and over and over again, you're going to eventually have the habit. And if we don't make the habits effective, then we're going to create bigger problems for all of us. Now, I got to tell you a story about habits and about leadership. So I told you earlier that I worked for Franklin Covey and Stephen Covey and his book, The 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. So one day I was in Indianapolis teaching a workshop, it was just a public program where anybody that wanted to could come spend 3 days and learn about the 7 habits of highly effective people. So as I was teaching the program, there was a group there. They were a very diverse group from a bunch of companies in the Indianapolis area. And I asked a question that goes back to the principle idea. I said, for 3 days, we've been living principles. I've been teaching you how to live the 7 habits of highly effective people, how to be an effective leader, and how to live these principles inside and out, forward, backward, up and down. So here's the crazy question. If you live these principles consistently and effectively in your lives, what does it guarantee you? What does the principle lived effectively guarantee you, right? Because it can't guarantee you everything. It can't guarantee you'll live longer. It can't guarantee that everything will be perfect. So what good is living these principles? And I had a man raise his hand in the back of the room. And he's just a very average looking guy. And he said, well, honestly, I've lived these principles. And let me tell you what it guarantees you. This man was a recruiter for the military and was on one of the floors of the Murrow building in Oklahoma City when Timothy McVeigh blew up the building. And when it blew up, literally half of the building disappeared and a lot of people were hurt and killed, including some of his people. And he said, when that building blew up, I had already been living these principles of effectiveness. And it didn't guarantee that all my people lived. It didn't guarantee that I wouldn't have a traumatic event in my life like this explosion. So I asked him, what did it guarantee you? And he said, it guaranteed me that when the dust was settling and in this dark, our ears were ringing, horrible, difficult place to breathe, that my people would follow me because I lived the principles of effectiveness. What it guaranteed me is it increased the likelihood that my followers would follow me because they could trust me. And the truth is the same with these 3 very basic secrets. When you live the secrets that I'm talking about, your relationships, you make it so people want to follow you. You make it so people can follow you, that they trust you. When you focus on the smoke instead of the fire, people don't trust you. But when you know how to get down to the fire, they trust you. They want to follow you. When you're a leader or a husband or a wife that empowers solutions instead of problem talk, people trust you and they want to follow you. They want to solve problems with you. And when you pay attention to the patterns and you're willing to show that you will change the patterns, they follow you. And what's amazing is life gets better. It doesn't make it perfect. But the neatest thing about it too is you know that you can live the principles that lead to peace, even if your partner doesn't. 2 heads are better than 1. 1 head is better than 0. I need 2 heads in the game, but if I can't get you and your spouse's head in the game, then let's just get one of your heads in the game. You can go through this program and you can learn how to fix your patterns. Now in the webinar, we don't have time to go through all of them, but you already know some of your patterns that aren't helping you. In the deeper, full Feeding the Starved Marriage digital program, we teach you how to identify your patterns, how to quit reacting to the pattern, how to call a timeout, how to recognize the signs that you're entering a reactive pattern, and how to change the pattern. We teach you how to make habits of all of the principles that we're teaching. And it works, and it's powerful, but you've got to get in. 2 heads are better than 1. 1 head is better than 0. One of my favorite quotes in the program is 2 frogs are sitting on a log. One decides to jump off. How many frogs are sitting on the log? 2. Because somebody decides to go through this program and take the webinar does not mean you've made the changes yet. You're still sitting on the log. If you want to jump in and make a change, I'll show you how in a minute. In reality, no changes will be made till we jump off and start making the change. By the way, I only need one of you to jump. The other will eventually get the clue that they're alone. Or will get the clue because they'll see that you're becoming so much more effective. We got to start jumping, folks. And when we start jumping, what it usually means is we've got to start living the skills, living the tools, focusing on the fire, empowering solutions, and paying attention to the patterns. Okay, so to summarize, the 3 secrets that we've learned in the webinar, they're very basic, but let's go over them again to make sure they're etched into your mind. Secret number 1, focus on the fire, not the smoke. Secret number 2, empower solutions, not problems. Secret number 3, pay attention to the patterns. One of the things I really love about how we design the program is that it's really meant to bring people together, especially husbands and wives. It's good for both people, both genders, both approaches, and our differences. It's good for men, it's good for women, because I know so many times we seem to have such different needs in our relationships. For example, did you know that 70% of the divorces that are filed in the United States are filed by women? And when the wife officially files for the divorce, the men are confused many times because they didn't even really think the marriage was that bad off. It didn't seem to be having that many problems. When rating a marriage, men actually rate their marriages higher than women do. On average, men see their marriage more positively than women do. So what I've tried to be able to do in the program is to address some of the differences that make us see our relationships so differently. Why is it that a wife sees it so much more negatively maybe than a husband does? In this program, I found that if we teach men the tools to communicate and learn how to not react, they will start to use those tools to better understand the needs of their spouses. For example, when men communicate, we tend to be fairly literal. We literally mean what we say. If we want sex, for example, we might literally say, I want sex, okay? Very clear. You want sex. It seems very obvious and abrupt. But when a guy says that to his wife, she might not hear it as literal or as specific and clear. when he says, hey, honey, do you want to have sex tonight? She might say to herself, okay, let's see. If we're connecting and we have a good conversation tonight, and if we clean up the kitchen, and if my legs have been shaved, and the kids are happy and in bed, and the doors are locked, if you were nice to my mom yesterday, and you weren't angry with the kids at night, then there is a 1 in 10% chance that we're going to have sex tonight. So all of that is going on in her head when he just kind of said what he meant. Women usually might read so much more into the conversation than the guys are reading into it. I talk about the fact that women actually read in between the lines of what's being said in a conversation. Women actually infer more into what's being said in the relationship. Men tend to read the lines. Women tend to read in between the lines. So what we're going to teach you in the Feeding the Starved Marriage digital program, for the guys, we're going to teach you the skills and the tools of emotional intelligence, how to better understand your spouse and her needs. And for the ladies, we're going to teach you how to better communicate with your spouse so that you can help meet his needs and build his confidence in this process of relating, so he can start to see how seriously important and essential it is in life. In the end, you're going to learn how to start the feeding frenzy in your relationship, how to really recapture the love that you once felt for each other. So I really just want to applaud you for caring enough, for doing what you can to improve your relationship. I know it's not an easy thing to come and go through this and to have to take on some of the troubles that you do, but you do need to understand that you've already made a major step just by being here today. Don't underestimate your ability to improve your marriage. You've learned the 3 secrets of feeding the starved marriage and some very specific ways in how you can implement it in your own relationship. Now remember, I've only given you a little bite, just 1 hour in this webinar of the complete Feeding the Starved Marriage digital program. There are a total of 42 skills in the complete program. It's 12 hours long, and I've only given you 3. So there are still 39 more skills in depth that we can address as you step into the full program. The key to all of this, though, is you've got to keep going. You've got to keep walking. You've got to take action now. One of my favorite quotes is from the painter Pablo Picasso. He says, "Small deeds done are better than great deeds planned." We've planned some pretty great marriage-saving ideas and deeds during the webinar for the last hour. But right now, if you don't start doing the things we've talked about, then all of the hope that you felt as we've been talking in the webinar will be lost. If you know you're going to struggle taking these ideas and implementing them in your marriage with your partner, if you know that you already have a habit of starting things and not finishing them, or of struggling to actually make things stick and work, if you have trouble sticking it out, if you set goals that you never finish, if you know that this is going to be something difficult for you, then let us help you. Remember, I've been at this for 25 years. I've been helping couples with every type of problem you can imagine, and I know I can help you through this as well. Literally, this program is designed for people that struggle. And struggle is normal in a relationship, and we've been at this for a long time, so I know we can help. To give you an idea of the value that is packed into this complete Feeding the Starved Marriage digital program, here's a little example. One way to work with me that is a little harder for some is live coaching. This is where you would actually fly into the Rocky Mountains of Utah, sit down with me as a couple for a weekend, and we would go through every one of the 42 skills in the feeding program and all the principles, and I would teach them with you, and we would work through them and do all of the activities together. Now that would be at least over 20 hours of work in about 2.5 days. So that program will cost you roughly $10,000 to $12,000 to come and sit down with me, and we can work on all of your issues together. And remember, my mission is to empower as many people as I can to improve their most important relationships, which for me, because my parents weren't able to make their marriage work, that most important relationship would be your marriage. So I've created other ways for you to come work with me that are much more affordable and much more accessible, that can help you immediately start to feed your starved relationship. So, to let you get a taste of the content inside the complete Feeding the Starved Marriage digital program, let me run through what you're going to get there. You're going to get unlimited access, lifetime access to our 12-hour Feeding the Starved Marriage digital program. In the content, you're going to learn the 42 different skills and tools to help you begin to feed the starved marriage. You're going to learn what a healthy marriage looks like. You're going to learn how to keep your head in the game, how to quit reacting to each other, how to call a timeout. You're going to learn how to have real conversations and actually cut through the smoke of life and get down to the real fire and the issues we talked about. You're going to learn how to take the high road with your partner, how to see them more positively. You're going to learn how to feed your partner in a variety of ways, and you're going to learn how to feed them their way. You're going to identify your loving styles, the way you most appreciate being loved, and you're going to learn how to work together to love each other the way you want to be loved. You're going to also spend time learning how to change, how to grow, and how to intentionally work together. That's all part of the 12-hour program. And in the 12-hour program, because it's a lifetime access and unlimited access, you can go through the program over and over as life changes. So right now, if you have a young family, you might need to go through the program and learn how to be patient and deal with co-parenting issues. But in 10 or 15 years, you'll be able to go through the program in a different way as you're dealing with teenagers or as you're dealing with other life issues, or how to communicate through job changes and other problems. So having an unlimited access to the program allows you to reuse the content over and over again. So along with the 12-hour Feeding the Starved Marriage digital content, we're going to be throwing in a lot of bonuses, which is just additional stuff, content, ideas, tools, other additional things that are going to help you take your marriage and implement the content you're learning. You're going to get a digital copy of my Starved Stuff book. The book is a 400-page book, which many call the Bible for feeding marriages. It has countless exercises and stories in it, and it will give you a lot of additional insights into how you can implement the feeding content into your relationship. You'll receive a digital copy of my Feeding the Starved Marriage workbook that you will use throughout the entire program. It'll be a 100-page workbook that you can either download and fill out interactively online, or you can print it off and fill it out by hand. It will correlate exactly with the video program and will be a great place to write notes, track your growth, and tailor specific plans to fit your marriage needs. You will also get 2 in-depth 50-point relationship assessments. You'll fill out the assessments and will immediately be able to figure out where you are in what we call the starved spiral, so that you can immediately get in and start to create value and change where you need it. You will also get unlimited email access to one of our certified Feeding the Starved Marriage coaches, where you can then email in any question you have, and your coaches will answer those questions for you and direct you to other resources in the program and even outside of the program to help you get more and more support around feeding your starved relationship. Some other bonuses we'll be giving you that I love and I'm so excited that we're putting in there are 3 additional ebooks and audio programs. Each of these programs runs about 2 hours or so and touch on 3 different topics that I have found over coaching for so many years are essential to helping you truly grow and fix the different parts of your marriage at different stages of your marriage. You will also become a member of our Feeding the Starved Marriage Facebook community, where you can interact with other members and share success stories, learn best practices from other participants on how they turned their marriages around. You will also get direct access to my blog and my radio show podcast for the Matt Townsend Show, where you'll be able to listen and search through thousands of hours of past shows and guests. Remember, every day I'm on satellite radio for about 3 hours a day, interviewing some of the country's leading relationship experts, scholars, and life coaches. So you will have access to all of those interviews, and you can sort through them, and whenever you have an issue or a question, just do a little sort, and all of a sudden you'll have a lot of additional resources. Also, you'll get access to my weekly TV appearances. Every single week, I put together an 8-minute video with a local television station in Salt Lake City where I address a new topic every week and deliver about 4 to 5 different solutions on how to fix that one issue. And the fun thing about it, new topics every single week. You'll also get access to our monthly email newsletter, where we'll give you the latest and the greatest content releases, the latest books we've written, and all of the information about how to get priority access and discounts on the new programs that we're releasing. So as you can see, this program is jam-packed with value, but you don't have to take my word for it. Here's some testimonials from clients of all stages and all ages that have gone through the program. One client said, Matt Townsend is a mix of Tony Robbins, Stephen Covey, and Dr. Phil all rolled up in one. He is the relationship guru. Another client claimed, it's life-changing. Thanks for helping me become so aware of my habits that affect our marriage and showing me the way to change. We will never be the same. And one more, Matt's Feeding the Starved Marriage workshop is so fulfilling. It has lifted the fog from my eyes and showed me what I need to do to improve myself and feed my wife. And there's literally hundreds of other reviews just like that of the people that have gone through this and have made it work. So, to purchase the complete Feeding the Starved Marriage digital program that is valued by some of our own members at over $10,000, you can get it right now on our website for $599. That is less than about 10% of what you would pay to come and do a live coaching program with me for just 2 days. Remember, my goal is to help you and everybody you know create the strongest relationships they can and to get this information out to as many people as I can. So I'm going to give you an even sweeter discount because you've been with us through this webinar. As a webinar-only discount, for the next 15 minutes, you can get the program for just $475. That's 20% off the website price. So in just a moment, you're going to see an offer pop up on the screen. Once you click the offer, it will take you to a custom discount page. Click the buy button, then create an account with your name and email address, and then you'll see the discount already adjusted in the price. And that's it. You're done. You'll receive an email with instant access to your lifetime membership of the Feeding the Starved Marriage digital program. So without further ado, here's the offer. So there it is. You have 15 minutes. And while you're registering, I'll stick around and answer some of my most frequently asked questions. So one of the questions I get asked most from people on the webinars is, what are my options if I can't afford this? And honestly, it's such a tough question because you can't afford what? In the end, as I look at it, as I work with couples, there really are only so many choices to make here. At some point, you have to decide, what is it worth to you? What is your marriage truly worth to you to make it work, to improve it? There are other options, and many of you have tried a lot of these options. You can go try therapy and hope that you get the skills and the tools to make it work. You'll still pay $150 to $300 for a good counselor, and usually you get a lot of counseling, maybe a lot of conversation, but many times you don't get as many skills. You can hire divorce attorneys, but that won't get you any more confidence. It actually won't even get rid of your problems because you still have to co-parent. You still have to deal with each other. As a child of divorced parents, it would have been worth so much for my parents to have learned how to do this. As a mediator who has sat there with hundreds and hundreds of couples struggling through a divorce, it's worth figuring it out how to do this. In the end, it comes down to you. What are you worth and what are you willing to put in to your marriage, and what is your marriage truly worth to you? So that needs to be thought out in your own head and thought through. What are the costs of this if it doesn't work? And what are the long-term impacts as well? Personally, I've seen it work with thousands of couples. And honestly, I don't know everybody's situation, and everybody's situation is different, but I've seen every kind of condition change and improve their marriage. I've seen every type of client with everything from affairs to infidelities to addictions to communication issues to just past issues of abuse and other issues. There is hope, and I've seen it in the program. I've seen people that just are willing to live the principles, and through the principles and exercising and practicing those principles, they eventually create the peace, and they find it was all worth it. Another question I get a lot is, again, what's the difference between what we might be getting from a marriage counselor versus from your coaching program? And we've already talked about some of those when we talked about the secrets, right? We're going to focus a lot more on the fire, not the smoke. We're also going to focus more on solutions. Many times when you go into a counselor, they'll sit down and they'll have one of you explain your side of the problem, the other explains their side of the problem, back to your partner, back to you, and we fight about the problem. Their goal is usually to slowly peel away the onion, and eventually they believe they're going to get down to a root cause, something that is causing this problem, and usually they're looking for it from your past. The reality, though, what I see that's a little different with coaching is I need to get results. I spent years in corporate America where they didn't pay you for day 2 if you didn't deliver on day 1. And when I got into this kind of therapy world, I realized that a lot of times we're willing to pay people for whether they get results or not. When I was a mediator, virtually every client that came and saw me had been through marriage counseling, and none of them had learned these skills yet. So one of the differences with coaching is I don't try to figure out what their parents or your grandparents did to you that makes it so you can't communicate today. Instead, what I do is I teach you how to communicate today. I then have you start to identify real life solutions that used to work in your marriage when you were happy and life was great, and try to get you to go back and do a lot of those. We also identify things that work today that you see are working and actually add to the relationship, and things that would work in the future if we could create the perfect scenario. So coaches tend to work more on solutions. We tend to also focus more on kind of the overall system. One of the interesting little facts about marriage counseling is that pretty much every marriage counselor, about 90% of them, say they do marriage counseling. The reality is only 12% of counselors have ever been trained in marriage and family systems. So if only 12% have even been trained in marriage and family systems, if you really want to go to a counselor, I would only go to one that's a licensed marriage and family therapist. Again, they know and understand the systems. When you're going through our program, you're going to learn skills, you're going to learn patterns, you're going to learn the STAR stuff, and we're going to do it as efficiently as we possibly can. Another question I get is, what if my spouse doesn't want to do the program? Can I go through it alone? Will it really help? Yes, yes, yes is the answer. Remember the quote, 2 heads are better than 1 head, and 1 head is better than none. If you want to make a relationship work, it would be ideal if we could get both people being effective in the relationship. But if I can't get both to do it, then let's just get one of you to be more effective. Wouldn't that make more sense if just one of you knew how to communicate and not fight and knew how to get down to the real issue and how to cut through the smoke and get down to the fire? In the end, think about it. Can you think of one thing you could do right now that would absolutely tick your spouse off? Just one thing. You're like, just one? I could give you 50 things. When you look at it, if you right now could think of one thing that would tick your partner off, can you not think of one thing that would actually make the relationship better? So isn't it weird that if you can do one thing to destroy the relationship, couldn't you do one thing to improve it? And if you can do one thing and learn more skills so you can do more things, then guess what? You're going to see a change. And in the end, what you're going to see is a lot of peace. I would learn how to do this for myself, because if this doesn't work, I still need to know how to go on and do it in my next relationship. There is a reason that second marriages have a higher failure rate and third marriages have an even higher failure rate. It's because we don't learn how to do this. So yes, absolutely, you can do it alone. And here's the coolest little stat for you. When one partner in our program starts and effectively starts living this content, you have a 75 to 80% chance that your partner will join in, because you're now the leader in the relationship. Another frequently asked question that we get a lot is, what if I need more help? What if we need more help as we're going through the program? Can we hire a coach or someone to kind of guide us through this? You know what? It's a very common worry. And to just help you at first, a lot of people think you need someone sitting by your side to make this content work. Remember, for the last 25 years, I've been working on it. 15 years I've been working specifically with couples that are struggling to go through the program. The program is designed to be self-practiced and self-learning. It's a program that will literally walk you through it step by step in what you should do. So just the layout of the program is designed to make it easier for you to do without the help. But yes, we do have coaches that are available. I have an entire team, a group of coaches that we've trained, along with other staff and other team members who will be there for you. Remember, as part of the program, you have access to via email to all of our coaches, and we can get you contacting them. You can ask your questions to them, and via email, they'll work through issues with you. So if you are having some issues and you want a little more support, then you can email us at me@matttownsend.com. Ask us your questions, tell us your concerns, and via email, we will have one of our coaches respond to you and start helping you through the process. Another question people ask is, what if we're already talking about getting a divorce, or if we're already separated? You know, what I usually say is welcome to the fold, right? Again, I remember so many times couples coming into my offices being separated or are on the verge of a divorce. And remember, the program was designed for those level of clients. And one of the things I found that is so beneficial and helpful is when couples would come and sit with me, I always suggest that they put the marriage on the shelf. There is a difference between being married and being able to relate effectively with each other. They're different things. So Feeding the Starved Marriage isn't a marriage saving course, really. It's a relationship improvement course. So what I like to do is put the marriage on the shelf by usually saying something like, look, let's agree that for the next 90 days, we are going to put the marriage on the shelf, and let's not worry about whether we stay together or whether we divorce. Let's not make any marriage decisions. Let's just agree for the next 90 days, we are going to work on skills to make sure we can relate effectively. Then after 90 days, once we have the skills and we know how to talk, we know how to have the habits to learn and not react to each other. We have the power to actually be real in our communication. We know how to love each other the way we want to be loved, and we know how to relate to each other. Then let's bring the marriage down and use all of our skills to talk through whether we want to stay married or what we want to do. Make sense? So if you are separated or if you are thinking of divorcing, I highly suggest you first learn to relate, because it will never be easier than right now to learn to talk. I know that sounds crazy, but you wait till you divorce and then try to talk to your ex-spouse. There's a lot of complexity to that. So instead, put the marriage on the shelf. Let's agree to 90 days to work on our relationship and make it all the improvements we can. Then after 90 days, let's make a big final decision. Another question a lot of people ask is, what is your success rate? How successful is this thing? Well, the reality is, all of the program has been tested and researched while I was doing my doctoral dissertation. So each part of the content and all of the specific content areas are proven to show anywhere from a 90 to 95% improvement in communications and conflict resolution skills, the ability to take the place of your partner and understand what they're going from. Also remember, it was all deeply seated in research that's highly validated in the academic world. How to resolve conflict, how to have loving rituals and traditions, all of these things that are in the program are already validated in a variety of ways. There's also some awesome research validating the fact that when you work on your marriage improves, period. It's called marriage enrichment, and it's proven to be highly successful. Now, one of the things that I've always offered in my program, because we're so confident that it works, is a money-back guarantee. Every single client that comes in, I will be willing to give you a money-back guarantee. By the way, something you will never get from a counselor or a therapist. You go and meet with a counselor or a therapist and see if they'll give you the money back. It won't happen. But I'm so confident in the program and that it will work. Here's how the money-back guarantee goes. For literally 15 years, I've offered a money-back guarantee on this program. And in the 15 years, I've had less than a handful of people ever come back and ask for their money back. Basically, it works like this. If you are willing to get in, to do the homework, to be involved with your partner, I will guarantee 3 things will happen, or I'll give you your money back. I'll guarantee you'll understand more emotional management skills. You'll learn how to quit reacting to each other. You'll learn how to take a time out. I'll guarantee you'll be able to better communicate with your partner, even better than you probably ever have. I'll also guarantee you'll know how to love and serve your partner their way, or I'm willing to give you your money back. Now again, in 15 years, a handful of people have said they've done everything. The reality is this program will not fail because of us. It's pretty tried and tested. It's going to fail if you're unwilling to work the program. There is enough content, there is enough material in the content that you have got plenty to learn and plenty to do. By the way, it doesn't always guarantee the marriage, because that sometimes you may have made a mistake in your marriage, but it will guarantee you'll be able to relate at a completely different level. So one of the questions I get a lot as I'm doing the webinar is, does this thing really work? Well, obviously my answer is yes, but let me instead go back to some testimonials again so you can hear it right from the words of the clients that I've worked with. One client says, where most marriage workshops have the participants looking at what doesn't work in their relationships, Matt's positive solution-based approach to human relations helped me see that many things are working in our marriage. It reminded me how really good I've got it. One client said, inspiring. The Feeding the Starved Marriage Workshop gave me the hope and the skills to truly become the partner to my wife that I know I needed to become. Another client said, it was awesome. It was the first time my husband actually showed a desire to work on our marriage. He loved listening to Matt and felt comfortable doing the exercises that Matt led us in. No one has ever reached and motivated my husband the way Dr. Matt Townsend did. And one more, before the workshop, I had no hope in my marriage. Now I have some hope and I know where to get more. I want to learn and change, and with Matt's help, now I know I can. One client wrote in saying, I just have to tell you that you have made an amazing difference in our family. Because of what you taught us, we totally changed the way we spend time together and turned it from time that we dreaded into time that was unique and special for all of us. You are a miracle worker. Another client stated, I have attended private sessions with Matt, along with the Starved Marriage Workshop, and have come away each time feeling more empowered to make my life better. The tools he gives and the principles he teaches are simple and truly have a positive effect in my life. The way Matt teaches makes it fun and makes it so much sense. I wish I would have had this knowledge many years ago, as it has helped in my relationships in all aspects of my life and has made me a better mother, a better friend, and a better partner. Matt and what he teaches is truly awesome. And there's literally hundreds of other reviews just like that of the people that have gone through this and have made it work. But our time has officially expired, folks, so we have to wrap it up there. Now, if any of you procrastinators who weren't able to get in on time, or any of you struggling with your credit cards, having problems getting through, just email me at matttownsend.com, and we'll get back with you. We'll help you get through the process and program. I want to thank you again. You could have spent your hour doing anything you wanted to do, but instead you chose to focus on your relationship. Remember, we're here. We want to be a part of helping you improve your relationship. And if you're not doing it with us now, know we'll be there in the future. And if you have friends or family that you want to refer to us as well, send them a link to the webinar and we'll take care of them as well. One of the key things I want you to remember is a simple quote by Gandhi that says, you must become the change you seek in the world. If you want more safety in your marriage, you become more safe. You want more trust, be trustworthy. You want more appreciation, be appreciative. You want more respect, be respectful. You want more validation, then learn to validate. You want more encouragement, be encouraging. You want more dedication, then get in. If you're tired of being starved in your marriage, then let us help you get through the Starved program. And no matter what happens, you become the change and start changing your marriage today. Now, get out there and start feeding the marriage.